My name is Jake Broe, and I'm a United States Air Force veteran. I served for 6 years as a nuclear missile operations officer, and around 2019, I started a YouTube channel kind of as a side hobby. It was doing well enough where I felt like I could get out of the military, do it full time. My official separation date was February of 2022, the exact same week as Russia launched their full scale invasion. I made this one off video just giving my thoughts and reactions to what was going on in the world. This was the number one news story. That video got a lot of views, and I kind of got pulled into this position of a YouTuber that talks about the war in Ukraine. And I never really identify as a military blogger, but that's what people call me, and that's the role I've been in for the last 4 years. And here I am. Good to see you again, Starsky.
Good to see you too, my friend. Let's talk about the most recent updates. Donald Trump seems heavily involved in the peace talks, and today there's negotiations taking place in Abu Dhabi between Ukraine, Russian terrorists, and the United States. Do you see Trump being genuinely diplomatic, or is just political posturing, or maybe something else, in your personal opinion?
I almost feel like, given that a year has gone by, Donald Trump has now been president for more than a year. We kind of forgot why he cares so much about being involved in this process. And if we go back to the 2024 election here in the United States, Donald Trump, in every interview, was bragging that he could end this war in 24 hours. People have short attention spans. People forget, given the news cycle and the way that Trump just continuously breaks the headlines and makes new headlines every day. We forgot this. But the reason why he's so involved in the peace process is because he promised he could end the war in 24 hours. That was a year ago. He can't do it. But he stays engaged because he just wants the attention on him. He wants things to remain relevant. Is anything going to come of these peace talks in Abu Dhabi? And I'll state the obvious that, of course, I want there to be a breakthrough. Of course, I want there to be a ceasefire. But Vladimir Putin and the Russian state has given no indication, no signals that they want to agree to a ceasefire or stop this war short of taking everything they think they can take in Ukraine. So at the moment, the Russians don't feel like they're losing, which to me is objectively insane, and they want to keep going.
Trump has reportedly secured an agreement on U.S. security guarantees with Ukraine. How credible do you think this is?
Not credible at all. Donald Trump, up until yesterday, was willing to attack a NATO country, Greenland, to seize the island and then take his resources for himself. We actually had this experience just 3 weeks ago when the Russians conducted a false flag attack on Putin's residence, and they forgot the flag. They claimed that Ukraine used drones to try to assassinate Putin, and they didn't even stage anything. Like, they didn't launch air missiles or send out text alerts to residents in the area. They didn't shut down the regional airport. It was blatantly obvious that there were no Ukrainian drones trying to hit Putin's residence. All Russia has to do is conduct a false flag attack against themselves, and Donald Trump will just say, I believe Putin and I believe the Russians, and these security guarantees that we discussed to get a ceasefire or an end to the conflict are no longer in place. So Donald Trump is not a man of his word. He is not someone who can be trusted. There could be some kind of security guarantees provided by other Western partners. If France and the UK or other members of the EU want to get serious about sending in peacekeepers, if there's a ceasefire, that could potentially hold. But no, the United States military under Donald Trump is not a reliable partner. Anybody saying the nonsense of Article 5-like guarantees, I don't even think Article 5 exists anymore. If Russia were to attack the Baltics, I don't think Donald Trump would defend NATO or defend any of our Eastern European partners. So that's a tragedy. That's an embarrassment. I'm very ashamed as a United States veteran right now, but this is the reality we currently live in.
Speaking of our European partners, the European leaders have been criticized for a lack of action or decision. Do you think that this critique is justified?
Yes and no. I think all of these European leaders are facing real pressure from far-right parties, whether it's the Front in France, the AfD in Germany, Reform in the UK. Donald Trump, J.D. Vance, and Elon Musk are all funding and promoting these far right groups, stoking fear and hatred of Muslims and foreigners to try and give them to give up power. So I understand the position that these politicians, centrists or liberals, whatever you want to call them, if their economies suffer, this just creates more unrest within Germany, the UK, France. If economies decline, people are more likely then to embrace these far right fascist parties. If they gain control, they will ally themselves with MAGA and the Russians, and that's not going to benefit Ukraine. So I understand the position they're in. Uh, but if they had taken stronger action 3 or 4 years ago, back when Joe Biden was president, perhaps we could have had a faster resolution to this war. We're in the situation we're in. There's plenty of finger pointing to go around. As an American, I don't have the right to cast stones against anyone else, but I'm going to keep making noise and doing what I can. And for any of my friends in any European countries, now's the time to speak up. Now's the time to take action. This is not the moment to disengage or to stick your head in the sand. We're in a global struggle right now for human rights and democracy, and we are dangerously close to an inflection point in which we may never return.
Do you think that we will witness some kind of creation of a new military alliance in the future, like NATO, but around Europe?
Well, ideally, if Trump and MAGA can be removed in 2029, don't know how we're going to achieve that, then I think, yes, we do need to reform the NATO structure. The fact that one country, Viktor Orban in Hungary, can just veto any decision, hold up the alliance, sabotage from within. Obviously, they have conflicts of interest and they are accepting money from the Russians. Same with Fico in Slovakia. We need a better control system for members when they go rogue, when they are corrupted. They should be punished or expelled. If you don't support what 95% of the alliance wants to do, then you can just leave. You don't have to be part of it, Hungary. You don't have to be part of it, Slovakia. But I actually want to see NATO reformed in the future and create a new global democracy alliance. Let's get Australia, New Zealand, Japan, South Korea in the alliance and work together, because there's an axis of authoritarian regimes that are all coordinating. Iran, North Korea, China, Russia. I understand they don't formally have a name for themselves, but they are clearly doing joint military exercises. They are sharing intelligence. They are copying each other's tactics to infiltrate, corrupt, and ruin our democracies. We have to defend ourselves. We have to fight back. Most people are still asleep to this danger, but it's there and it's growing. It's not going away. And we need to, at some point, hopefully by 2029, once we in America get rid of MAGA, we can create a new security architecture to protect our democracies and protect our freedoms and human rights. And Starsky, Ukraine's going to be in that alliance, and they're going to be the second most important and powerful member of that alliance. They're going to have the most experience and the most to gain, and the greatest understanding of what the real threat is, having directly fought the Russians the last 4 years.
Do you think that Ukraine can contribute its military experience and military technologies into the future military alliance?
The fact that a $300, $400 FPV drone can destroy a $10 million tank, the old economics of how defense industry companies make money, it's gone. And we need to live in reality and understand how the next war is going to be fought. Ukraine has the experience, they have the knowledge, they're the ones who have been experimenting the last 4 years. It will be their leadership that Western partners are going to seek. And I hope, we're not going to have a bigger conflict, a bigger war to come, but it is going to involve drones. It is going to involve AI. And I know for a fact the United States military is not prepared, that if American soldiers are fighting a ground war somewhere, they're not prepared. They don't understand how warfare has changed as a result of Putin's invasion of Ukraine.
Some American voices are critical of foreign aid in times of domestic pressure. How can Ukraine's supporters effectively counter this narrative?
There's always going to be internal pressure. No society has achieved utopian status and has no problems and there's just extra money lying around that's not being used and that we can help other people. It is a priority. But to my American friends, I argue Ukraine is fighting for us. They're fighting for our democracy right now. They're fighting for Western values that I know Donald Trump and JD Vance and Elon Musk don't respect, appreciate, or want to continue. But I still do. I still believe in human rights. I still believe that people who live in freedom, who live in democracy, who have some say in their government, I still believe that democracies are capable of resolving conflicts without going to war. But as soon as an authoritarian or a dictator is in charge of a country, they're not reasonable. They don't negotiate in good faith, and they are quick to pull the trigger. They want to go to war in order to expand their own influence and reach and territorial boundaries. I don't want to return to an age of empires. And I understand my government and Trump, they're trying to do that, talking about annexing Canada and Greenland and Cuba and Venezuela and all these other countries. In that scenario, millions die. There is a percentage of the American population that supports that. They don't see a problem with people in Venezuela suffering or dying as long as we get their oil. I think this thinking is pretty cold and short term. There are going to be lots of complications as a result of this strategy, but no, I identify with the people of Ukraine because I believe they share our values. They want to live in a society with, there's no way to end corruption, but a lesser degree of corruption. And they want to uphold law. They want to have free and fair elections. They want to have a responsible government, and they don't want to go to war. Ukraine didn't want this war. They just want to live in peace. They're blessed with great geography, great land, fantastic culture, wonderful people. If they could just be left alone by the Russians for the first time in centuries, they would prosper. And I want to see that for them because I think that would lead to a better world for everyone.
How can you convince somebody that the idea of might makes right cannot survive historically?
Well, ideally, I would tell them, you got to go put on a uniform, go to the front lines, and die for your emperor. For every king, for every dictator, they have to give a justification or a reason why their soldiers are dying for them to expand their national borders. You can talk about religion, you can talk about race, ancient blood feuds, whatever, but all of these keyboard warriors online, none of them actually want to go volunteer to die in Trump's overseas wars. And a year ago, they were saying no more stupid wars. We want to vote for Trump because he's the candidate of peace. So there's just a lot of misunderstanding about history, and people like Elon Musk, they're idiots, and they talk about how we should go back to the way things were, the days of the Roman Empire and blah, blah, blah. But they don't actually embody any of the virtues that those old societies used to extol, such as honesty, integrity, honor. They lie about everything, and it's all self-interest. So your question is, how do I reach them? How do I convince them? And I don't think I can. I think a third of Americans are now firmly fascists. They're never going to change their opinion. They're never going to change their view. They do not want to see peaceful transitions of power back to a Democrat or a liberal. They're fine with other people taking up arms and doing whatever they need to do to hold on to power through violence. But there is this middle third, and those are the people we need to reach. And unfortunately, a lot of those people, I understand their situation. They're working a 9-to-5 job. They're raising kids. They want to just watch sports on the weekends and enjoy their life. So unless their daily life is disrupted, stock market crash or high unemployment or affordability crisis, all those factors are coming, by the way. But we need to reach those people and convince them to join our side.
According to the most recent messages coming from Abu Dhabi, Russians keep demanding Ukraine giving up territories, including those that Russians don't control as of today. What happens next? Will Trump administration pressure President Zelensky to comply with Russian demands, or do you expect some kind of different resolution?
Trump's been pressuring Ukraine to surrender for a year now. It's a trick. Will you please just give up all of your best defense lines that you've spent 2 years building? Just let our military cross those dragon teeth and razor wire and landmines, and We promise we'll stop. It's the dumbest ploy in the world, but Russia keeps offering it. They've been offering it for a year, and Trump keeps pressuring Zelensky, just give up Donbass. Give up. Originally, they were saying give up the city of Zaporizhia and the north bank of the Kherson. The Russians are kind of just saying we'll settle for just the Donbass region at this point. But no, Russia's never going to stop. Even if there's a freeze in the conflict for 6 months or whatever, they're going to go back for more. At this point, I think Putin is personally offended, and this has ruined his reputation that he has spent 2 decades building, this mythos of the great savior of Russia who got back, their global superpower status. And he wants to annihilate the Ukrainian identity. He wants to erase it from the history of the earth. That is his dying wish as he leaves this world. So do I think Zelensky's ever going to agree to it? And no. Zelensky's a smart enough guy to understand exactly what the Russians are doing. So it's all stalling and delaying. When Trump tells you to do something, you can say no behind closed doors. Don't publicly say no. But behind closed doors, you can say no. And Zelensky's been just kind of kicking the can down the road with him, saying, well, to do this, we might have to do a referendum. Like might amend the Constitution. Like I need to talk to these people. Trump gets upset and frustrated and tweets at him or yells at him. But no, Zelensky's never going to give up these defensive lines in the Donbass region. And honestly, these defense lines are the only thing protecting the rest of Europe as well. So no, nobody's going to give them up. Russia's not going to get anything for free. If they want to keep losing 1,000 or 2,000 soldiers a day for an additional wheat field here and there, that's how this war is going to end. It's a war of attrition, and eventually Russia's economy is going to collapse, or they're going to run out of guys dumb enough to sign contracts.
Putin still believes that he is winning in Ukraine. How powerful is Russia's bargaining position right now compared with Ukraine and the West?
It is interesting. I don't really care what Putin thinks. Putin is fully committed and he doesn't live in reality. But it is fascinating to watch military bloggers, and they're very confused. I remember when Trump was elected in November of 2024, there was a surge in contract signing. There were lots of Russian men who were saying, Trump got in, he's going to cut off all military aid and support to Ukraine. We're going to be in Kyiv in 6 months. I need to sign a contract now to get that fat paycheck and veteran status as we, march in a military parade once we take Kyiv in 6 months. And they still don't have full control of Pokrovsk. They still don't have full control of Mirnorod, even after the United States completely ended all direct military and financial aid. So Russian military bloggers have figured it out, that they are in desperate trouble. Additionally, these incidents in Iran, the fact that Putin hasn't commented publicly at all, the Russians have done nothing to offer support to the Iranian regime. And then you have Maduro just getting kidnapped by Delta Force. And Putin sat down with Maduro, I think in October, holding up this defense agreement saying, if Venezuela is attacked, Russia will come to their defense. And now you have all these Russian Shadow Fleet tankers. I think almost 7 have been seized by the United States Navy. And these are oil shipments that were supposed to go to Russia. What Russia was doing was sending military equipment to Venezuela, air defense systems, billions of dollars worth, and the Venezuelans were paying for it with their own crude oil being shipped to Russia for processing or to be resold. And Donald Trump is not taking these actions as, an attack on the Russian Shadow Fleet. He's calling it the Venezuelan Shadow Fleet, and no oil is allowed to leave Venezuela that doesn't go now to the United States. It's a very conflicting world, but I do think that people who support Russia are confused. Why is Donald Trump or the United States allowed to so easily depose Maduro, take our tankers, encourage civil unrest in Iran, and we can't respond? We have no spare capacity to help any of our allies, and we still don't fully control Pokrovsk after being outside the city for 2 years now.
Europe's military aid has dropped in 2025. Does this reflect fatigue or maybe strategic recalibration? How would you explain it?
As far as direct military aid going down, perhaps that is just an exhaustion of inventory. But Ukraine needs to be self sufficient. And I do think since Trump was reelected almost a year and a half ago now, there has been an effort to build up Ukraine's own domestic industry. Ukraine needs to be producing their own artillery shells, their own missiles, their own drones. Self reliance is their key because with an election, things can change for Ukraine. So they can't depend on any of their Western partners for consistent resupplies in the coming years because governments in democracies change. Ukraine wanted those tanks, they wanted those jets, they wanted those HIMARS or whatever, but they're going to win this war by out ratioing the Russians with cheap drones. You can already see it with what the new defense minister Fedorov is saying. We need to be killing 50,000 Russian soldiers a month. And most of those soldiers dying are going to be dying as a result of cheap FPV drones, less than $1,000. Whether they have fiber optic cables 20, 30, 40, or now 50 kilometers, they're just hunting day and night through all of the occupied territories for any Russian soldier, any supply vehicle. Zelensky said there was an inflection point in December. Domestic production of these fiber optic drones has now exceeded, I think, what their operators can deploy in manpower hours. So Ukraine needs more drone operators to now deal with their surplus, and they're just hunting. I don't feel sorry for these Russian men or these Russian soldiers, but it's not a fair fight. When they're just trying to get to the contact line to go on a scouting mission or an assault, they can't even get there. They can't get their supplies there because of these fiber optic drones now blanketing the front lines.
Yes, absolutely. And we can also see less infantry being involved in this, in actually keeping positions under control, because we also involve land drones deployed at the positions, like a single drone that belonged to the 3rd Assault Brigade that held a position under control for 1.5 months, and it still wasn't captured. But I want to ask you this, Jake. You and your amazing community of viewers are absolutely famous and legendary for fundraising for Ukraine. Can you tell us approximately how much have you already fundraised so far through your YouTube channel? And are there some initiatives like civilian aid or trucks or drones that you're busy with at this point?
There's really two different categories that my YouTube community has fundraised for. The first one being the very well-known NAFO 69th Sniffing Brigade. They've partnered with other YouTubers like yourself and Georgie from Ukraine Matters and Artur Rehi. And I've done 6 official fundraisers through them, fundraising over $7 million. We're about to deliver, I think, our 220th truck. So they've also done drones and other special equipment. $7 million is an insane amount of money. I don't know how our YouTube community keeps doing this when I don't know any other YouTube communities consistently fundraising $1 million every 3 months. Beyond that, I've done smaller fundraisers with, for example, Richard Woodruff in Lviv, and he does these mountain retreats for Ukrainian soldiers in the hospital recovering. They get to go up to the Carpathians for some therapy and treatment in the mountains with their families. I've also done some other fundraisers for specific military units or individuals that on a smaller scale. But in total, all of these other random fundraisers that I've mentioned or I've helped with, probably another $300,000 or $400,000. So in total, I think our YouTube community, which is incredible, has fundraised over 7.5 million. My next fundraiser is probably going to be at some point in February. I don't have a name or a theme yet, so stay tuned for that. But when that launches, if you're watching this and you want to contribute, I greatly appreciate it. Thank you so much for continuing to support Ukraine.
That is absolutely, absolutely amazing. What is the best way of finding the common tongue with the US citizens, considering the enormous pro-Russian propaganda and disinformation coming from individuals like Tucker Carlson, for example?
I don't think anyone has ever changed their opinion on anything, with all caps lock text being blasted at them. So you can have face-to-face conversations with people. If you meet someone and they seem like they're a reasonable person, receptive to learning the truth about what's happening in the world. I unfortunately don't meet very many people because I'm just sitting in this room all day, every day, making YouTube videos. But if you're somebody out in your community, your church, your school, your place of work, and there's somebody who seems confused, and then you want to share one of my videos or you want to have a conversation with them, that's probably your best approach. And I understand that's awkward sometimes and difficult to do, but this is a global struggle right now for democracy and human rights. We have to defend any political leaders or nations that are trying to uphold them, and we have to resist and oppose fascists who just want to consolidate power and engage in corruption to benefit themselves.
Looking ahead and considering current negotiations in Abu Dhabi, what outcome would you consider a most realistic resolution to current phase of the war?
I do think at some points Russia is going to have to agree to a ceasefire, but that point has to come when Putin feels that Russia is running out of manpower or running out of money. I've given up on the Russian people. I don't think the Russian people are ever going to rise up or oppose the regime. But if there's a freeze in the conflict and hundreds of thousands of Russian soldiers return home and they can't find employment, so they're no longer getting those lavish paychecks for being in the combat zone, that could trigger a revolution, which is actually an incentive for Putin to keep going. So how do I see this war ending? And the quickest and easiest way to end this war is for Putin to die. Natural causes, I'll take it. But if somebody can reach him, if you know what I mean, then the war will end. There will be a transition of power to a different dictator, but I think the regime will pause. They'll have to, whoever takes the podium in the Kremlin after Putin has expired, they're going to freeze the conflict to try and consolidate power. That's the moment of opportunity for then Ukraine to get their territory back, or at least some kind of settlement in which the war stops. But as long as Putin remains alive, it doesn't end with Ukraine. I mean, this is the Soviet project. You've got Dugin saying that none of these old Soviet republics have sovereignty. The war past Ukraine will continue into Moldova and Armenia and Azerbaijan and Kazakhstan and the Baltics and maybe Finland or Poland. This is a war for empire, and it's not going to stop until the guy at the top somehow is removed.